It's time, right, Mr. Finn?
It is
It's time for a little sipping. With the pinky finger out, we've already talked about this. Pinky finger out, it's time for Sipping on Scripture with Shayne Stanfield. Good morning, Shayne.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Today we're sipping on Scripture with readings for Monday of the 22nd week in Ordinary Time, and I call this one The Inconvenience of Truth. Believe me when I say that I greatly struggled with this title for today's reflection because of how closely it resembles the name of a controversial film produced by environmental alarmists nearly 20 years ago. It shall go unnamed. But I do want to talk about how troubling truth can be for some people, and the word inconvenience probably best describes the kind of nuisance these people can experience for themselves. Truth can become quite inconvenient for someone who suddenly finds himself in a position where they're forced to acknowledge something that they would rather conveniently continue to not acknowledge. In case you were wondering, I didn't find that environmental film very inconvenient, and I don't know of anybody that did, largely because it was widely perceived as lacking in truth, which is what made that film so controversial. What I'm talking about is true inconvenience, which is usually marked by genuine outrage, because after all, we're talking about something that either directly or indirectly assaults the foundation of one's pride. We're not talking about something on the order of a personal insult here. We're talking about an exposure to truth that works to destabilize or destroy something like a core understanding or belief that helps perpetuate a particular way of life. How so? Well, just imagine telling someone who is deeply rooted in the woke culture that there are only two genders that are based on biological sex, and that men can't become women and women can't become men. Former NCAA swimmer Riley Gaines found out just how violent truths like these can become as she was physically attacked by transgender activists following an event at San Francisco State in 2023, where she was defending women's sports. There should also be no surprise the amount of violence that can come from someone that is marinated in the culture of death, to the extent that they adamantly support any kind of abortion. But I must admit this is still quite shocking to see. Pro-life journalist Savannah Craven-Antow was unexpectedly struck twice in the face by a woman that she was interviewing for Live Action while on the streets of New York City this past spring. That woman quickly became violent without any warning during what seemed to be a reasonable exchange of differing viewpoints, and she left Savannah with a blood-covered face that required stitches. So after highlighting just these two of many similar examples, should we be surprised about what we read in today's gospel? I actually think this should not be questioned but stated the other way around. We should not be surprised about what we see in the world today, and that's because of what we read in today's gospel. Of course, I'm referring to the story of Jesus' confrontation in the synagogue with the people of his hometown of Nazareth, according to the 4th chapter of Luke. You might remember that this began with Jesus standing to read a messianic passage from the scroll of Isaiah before sitting down and telling the crowd that this particular passage had been fulfilled. They were at first amazed, but then they began to doubt Jesus, that he was the Messiah, regardless of having heard about all of the miracles that he had previously performed elsewhere. So Jesus responds to this by predicting that they would ask him for proof by performing for them the same miracles, but he points out that no prophet is accepted in his own native place. He continues by citing Elijah and Elisha, both having to travel to foreign lands to provide blessings to Gentiles who were suffering in the same ways as the Israelites because it was only the Gentiles that had sufficient faith. Recalling these truths infuriated those in the synagogue because they were being confronted with the fact that they lacked faith like their ancestors, and likewise, they would not receive any of the blessings that the others with faith would. Remember that these hometown people were friendly and welcoming just moments before, and yet they were quickly filled with enough rage and fury that they attempted to kill Jesus for doing this. Reading about such a rapid change in demeanor is much like watching the same unfold in Savannah's video when that woman was also faced with the inconvenience of truth. It was quite convenient for that woman to be friendly and welcoming to Savannah, much like the crowd in the synagogue was with Jesus, because she hadn't yet been forced to acknowledge and deal with that proverbial elephant in the room. And nobody wants to deal with that proverbial elephant in the room, so they easily turn to rage against anyone that dares to bring it to light. Again, it's more or less a retaliation for an assault on one's pride. The incident at the synagogue wasn't Jesus' first challenge, and we know that it wasn't his last because he continued to spark outrage all the way to the cross. And it continues to spark outrage today. The inconvenience of truth is the inconvenience of Jesus, because Jesus is truth, and the people of Nazareth surely testified by their actions that there is never anything convenient about that. So again, The incident in Nazareth is why we should not be surprised about what we see today. There is always potential for significant consequences for anyone who dares to point out and stand for truth. Jesus warns us, just as he warned his disciples in the 15th chapter of John, if they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. I'm not sure how you feel about that statement, but it sure does seem to be yet another inconvenience of truth.
I love it.
You know, and Shayne, nobody gets out of it. If you're going to serve the Lord, as you pointed out, you're going to have some of that. And to be shocked by it, I think, is the most shocking thing.
Yeah.
How are you shocked by the fact that there is a price to pay for following the man that they nailed to a tree?
Yeah. You know, unfortunately, it just doesn't stop there. And we had this incident last week at the school, and you can just go on and on. I just read something from Bishop Barron that, we shouldn't be surprised about this because Christians are the most persecuted of all religions. And it's going to continue that way.
Yeah. It's
Thank
there.
you, Shayne. Beautiful. Sipping on Scripture this morning.